Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles. We're here tonight live with our paid subscribers, but some of you will be watching or listening to this on Substack or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And I just want to say welcome to all of you. This is usually recorded on Wednesday or Thursday nights and released the next morning. It's Thursday night tonight. We have some breaking news here. Two things happened just before we got on air tonight. One was the indictment of Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York. She's released a very powerful statement in response to this corrupt indictment, and I sent it out a few minutes ago. I encourage everyone to see it. Second, now of Trump's enemies who've been indicted on trumped-up charges in the last couple of weeks. And another moment of escalation in his authoritarian fantasies coming to life here in America. And then the second thing that happened is that J.B. Pritzker announced that there are now California National Guard in Illinois. This was not announced. They weren't notified. They just stumbled upon them, apparently, today. So we now have not only Illinois National Guard, but the Texas National Guard, the California National Guard have been sent into Illinois. And today, the governor of Oklahoma, who's also the head of the National Governors Association, publicly criticized Trump for sending these National Guard troops from one state to another. It was an important sign of defiance against this kind of madness that we're seeing break out. We all have to acknowledge that that Governor Pritzker has done an extraordinary job and been a very powerful leader for us now, starting with his embrace of the Texas redistricting and now everything he's doing in Chicago. And I think that these two things are connected. They both feel like Trump is lashing out at his opposition and the people that he believes have defied him or challenged him or prosecuted him or effed with him, right? And that he, in this kind of immature, puerile, childish, impulsive way, that he's using the government against his political opponents. They have continued to talk about how they're going to use the American military against all of us, right? This is the beginning by putting them into the cities, but Stephen Miller has declared the Democratic Party a domestic terrorist organization. The level of escalation of language has been extraordinary. Pam Bondi, yesterday, the Attorney General, said that they're using the military in Venezuela, and now they're going to turn it against Antifa here in the United States, right? And just as we talk about all this stuff, there is something so fundamentally ridiculous about all of this, and it's grave and it's serious. And Trump is now beginning to not just threaten, but to act upon the threats. But there's also something so fundamentally unbelievable and comical and absurd about everything we're witnessing. Antifa doesn't exist. They've invented a domestic left-wing terrorist organization that doesn't actually exist, and are now mobilizing the American military against an imaginary domestic threat. He's making peace abroad and waging war at home, and just the absurdity of all this. We can't lose sight of it, right? It's one of the things that I've enjoyed about the Portland protests, which is you've seen the frog and a dinosaur and these people dressed up in these costumes because it's an appropriate level of mockery and raising the absurdity of what they're doing and just how fundamentally just insane all this is and absurd and we're going to find the right words. I don't have the right words right now and to describe all this. This is all new stuff, but I don't know if you all saw, but this frog who's been protesting outside the ICE headquarters in Portland was pepperballed by by the ICE agents. And in the video, which I'll share tomorrow, the pepper balls like bounce off this big bluffy, this big blubbery frog, right? And it's just so ridiculous. And of course it's not ridiculous, right? They've shot this pastor, they killed a woman, right? And now we know, and they're stealing, there's incredible video today of a young woman going to pick up her kids at school, and ICE breaks into her car, in front of the school, in front of all the kids, right? And seizes her out of the car. She's yelling that I'm here to pick up my children, right? And just like levels of just cruelty and six ICE guys, by the way, right? All in their full regalia. This poor young, woman in her 20s, got dragged out of the car in front of all the kids in school. And so, as I keep saying here, but we're here now. And, we are in this place that we never thought we would be. Trump is executing on his authoritarian fantasies. And, we are going to have to mount a far more forceful response to this than we have to date. And I just want to assess, as I do here every week, sort of I try to assess the landscape and where we are and take a step back from the day-to-day crunch of things. And again, I go back to this basic insight that I've had here, which is that Trump is doing this and he's escalating and he's finding new ways to restore his manhood and manliness and his power and his strength because it is ebbing from him. And it is unbelievably important to keep both of these things in our heads at the same time because they are both true and they're related. His poll numbers this week after what's happened over the last 10 days actually got worse in all the polls that came out this week in the Ipsos Reuters poll, in the Economist YouGov poll, in what was the third major poll that came out this week? I'm now spacing on it, but the Civics Daily Track. Trump dropped a point to 3 points in all polls, after uh, the events of the last few weeks. He continues, again, he's not had any sustained recovery in polling since he started dropping in June. He just continues to drop down further. As I showed earlier this week, on every issue that matters, with the exception of immigration and border security, Trump is now in the 20s and 30s in his job approval or in the various ways you rate this stuff. It's highly unusual in our business to see politicians or issues that don't live in the 40s and 50s because everything is kind of in this polarized country, right? I mean, everything's sort of like 42, 45, 52. Trump is now below his base. If you put his sort of rock bed base at, let's say, 40% or 38%, or what I would have assumed would have been his rock bed base. First of all, he's hitting 38, 39, 40 in polls now all the time. So he's sort of getting down to what I felt would have been, the rock bed base of his support. And on many of the major issues that matter, right? On whether the Democrats are the ones causing the shutdown, 30% the public agrees with the president on that. On inflation and on healthcare, he's at 32, 33, 34, 35 approval. On issues surrounding Pew has had all this new data this week about him abusing his office. And all those things, his support level on these things are in the low to mid 30s. And so you're now seeing him structurally in polling consistently being in, and even on the question that we saw this week from Kaiser about do you think that the subsidies should be continued? Only 21% agreed with the president that the ACA subsidies should be cut. And so we're now seeing significant numbers of his own supporters not rallying to him. So if he goes out and says the Democrats are causing the shutdown and only 30% of voters agree with him on that, that means that 40% of the people that voted for him do not agree with him, right? And people keep saying that, how far does he have to go? Well, he's now regularly on issues that really matter to him. The economy, healthcare, right? These things that matter to voters, threats to democracy, all this. He is now consistently in the low to mid 30s, meaning that A third of MAGA, the people that voted for him, are just not rallying to his arguments. They may still be rallying to him. I mean, he's showing up in most of the major independent polls between 38 and 42, meaning that, he's lost about 20% of his voters, between 15 and 20% of his vote, the people who voted for him, right, are disapprove of what he's doing, which is pretty remarkable, right? But now we're seeing much even bigger numbers of people not agreeing with him on major issues. And so we saw, for example, this huge break where Marjorie Taylor Greene is now openly criticizing the president and the congressional leadership for cutting the ACA subsidies, for also, essentially playing games and shutting down the government when they have the ability to keep the government open. And she's been wildly critical, and she's also doing all sorts of media. She didn't just make one statement and walk away. She went on CNN today. She interviewed with NBC News. She's going into the mainstream media, not MAGA media, and demonstrating defiance against where the Republican Party is going, as she has done with the Epstein files, right? She's one of the ones that have broken, that signed, the discharge petition. So we're now starting to see, I often say little cracks can become big cracks. We're starting to see now things that are more than little cracks. What happened with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the passage of this discharge petition, which will happen whenever Congress comes back and Mike Johnson quits playing these ridiculous games by preventing his members from coming home. He's had the audacity to claim that, people had hard things they needed to do at home, right? But of course, he canceled the session, right? So they were supposed to be here. So anyway, I think that you also have seen, as I mentioned earlier today, the governor of Oklahoma, forcefully break with Trump on his use of the National Guard in Illinois. And, this is a prominent, important Republican governor. Very few Republican governors have ever broken from Trump on anything. And then today or yesterday, and I'm forgetting now when it happened, I was reading about it this afternoon, and I don't know if it was this morning or last night. There was a vote on to roll back the president's emergency authority on the Venezuela, the killing of people in the Caribbean, and he lost two Republicans on that. Now, why does this matter? Because if there's a breach where four Republican senators, Collins, Murkowski, Tom Tillis, Rand Paul, on various issues, start structurally breaking off, right? They start losing control of the Senate. The same is true in the House. This is why this discharge petition is such a seminal moment, which is that there will have been now a formal break on a major priority of the president and Mike Johnson, where they couldn't keep their conference, as they call it, in line. And what we have to be doing, I think, in our work, in our vigorous defense of what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have started, is this process that I've described as a process now for that we're in the fight that we all wanted to be in. And the fight that we're in is the fight to make the Republicans take responsibility for the harms they're doing to the country. The Economist has a story tonight that I'll publish tomorrow in Hopium about how, Trump is clearly doing material harm to the American economy. You're hearing this from farmers all over the country. We know it from inflation. We know it from the wreckage of the healthcare system. We know it from the clean energy tax cuts. We know it from his trampling of our rights and liberties and sending the military into American cities. This agenda of harm and the harm that he's doing to all of us. And this is what makes this moment, by the way, very different from 2018. I was the chief outside strategist for the DCCC in that cycle when we flipped the House. And at this point, in 2017, and by the way, we won that election by 8.6 points, right? It was a blowout midterm election. And at this point, the big controversy was that Trump was trying to get rid of the ACA, which they just did basically, right? But it was blocked. And then he passes big tax cut. And his numbers plummeted during the late summer and fall when the ACA debate was happening. And he paid an unbelievable price on something that didn't happen, right? The ACA, they attempted to take the ACA away, and that campaign to take it away, which failed, that John McCain prevented from happening in that famous moment, caused so much damage to Trump that they never really recovered. And that the damage to Trump in the 2018 cycle happened really at this moment in 2017. And we went in that election, which we won by 8.5 points, the economy was doing really well. The tax cuts had taken effect, so many people had gotten tax cuts, and healthcare wasn't destroyed. And where we are 8 years later is the economy's doing terribly. Inflation, the economy is slowing and inflation is rising. The deficit is exploding. So the economy, as a backdrop, 8 years ago, the economy did well. He actually did get rid of the ACA, essentially, right, and cut and has done enormous damage to the American healthcare system. And so he is doing things that are so much more harmful to people than what they did 8 years ago when we blew them out in the midterms. And so part of what the dynamic here is that they are panicking about the poll data and all this stuff. And anyone who discounts the centrality of the poll data to everything that's happening here just doesn't understand Trump and doesn't understand our business. Because this is why they're so desperately trying to create all these congressional, just steal all these congressional seats. This is why Marjorie Taylor Greene, she went on CNN today and said 60% of the calls into my office are agreeing with me, both Democrats and Republicans, right? Trump is lashing out at his enemies because his powers are ebbing. He is in clear cognitive and physical decline, right? I mean, we know this. We can see it. He had another droopy face moment this week. And he literally, at this Antifa event they did 2 days ago, he fell asleep, right? In an event that was like a half an hour long, by the way, or 45 minutes long. He fell asleep in an event. And he and so his powers are ebbing. He's politically unbelievably unpopular. The economy isn't going the way he wanted. World leaders aren't bending the knee to him. Putin has treated him like a chew toy, a dog's chew toy, and just chewed him around and thrown him out, right? He is going to get some kind of win in Israel and Gaza, we think, right? We'll see what happens. I'm not convinced that at the end of the day, this is going to accrue to his benefit because he's also been complicit in the killing of large numbers of Palestinians in Gaza. And so I will see if this is something that they can plausibly spell as a win to anybody outside of their MAGA base. I want to note that tomorrow the Nobel Peace Prize is going to be given out. It's almost inconceivable that Donald Trump, I mean, it's far more likely, in my view, that Donald Trump ends up in The Hague than he does getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And because he has by gutting and vaporizing USAID, the estimates are that that will end up killing 15 million people around the world, the poorest people in the world, including 5 million children. I mean, he is a mass murderer. He's a genocidal maniac. And so, that's happened. And now here in the United States, the Nobel Peace Prize is going to give a guy who's, you know, trying to put his political enemies in jail and sending military troops illegally, unlawfully, unconstitutionally into the streets of cities. I mean, my God, the level of delusion and madness that this represents, it's just unbelievable that we're even talking about it because he's operating so outside the bounds of the modern world and modern democracies. I mean, he is operating as a legitimate, full-on malevolent authoritarian leader in the world's most important democracy. In what universe could the Nobel Peace Prize Committee ever grant him, a reward for what is, arguably the most dangerous illiberal behavior we've seen in a world leader maybe since Hitler in the night or Mao, right? I mean, this is because he's undermining the democratic cause for the whole world, not just here in the United States by what he's doing. The level of the stuff that he's breaking is he's breaking democracy and weakening democracy through the entire world by all this. And so, where I feel like where we are now is that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries made a wise decision to fight on healthcare. And we've seen it in the polling this week that, the polling shows that we're winning all the major arguments in this shutdown. And today, Senator Thune started floating a deal, right? So they're backing off their hardline position because they're losing the argument. Schumer and Jeffries have been very forceful and strong. That video that Chuck Schumer released yesterday was sort of a massive escalation and elevation, a higher gear that we've all been wanting him to have, right? And I can tell you, if you've watched the interviews we've done with the House members and with Cory Booker the other night, with Adam Smith and Eric Swalwell and Cory Booker and Gavin Newsom, I mean, all these amazing interviews we've had in recent weeks and recent days, there's this sense of confidence that the senators and House members have that they've done the right thing here. And so I think we are winning this argument. But the argument to me, and the next step in all of this, is that we have to make our argument stronger. We have to deepen it, widen it, strengthen it by making it not just about healthcare, but also about the illegal, unconstitutional tariffs and the way that they've wrecked our economy and caused prices to rise on all goods for everyone and to reignite inflation. And also this basket of issues around threats to democracy, abuse of power, corruption. I think we need to have three legs in the stool of our argument over the coming months. I think we can make it. We've come into this fight strong, and healthcare is working for us. But I think we can make our arguments stronger as we go deeper into this debate because the debate now is a debate we're going to be having for 13 months. This is the same debate we're going to be having 3 months from now and 6 months from now, which is that we're trying to mitigate the harms that Trump is doing to the country and offer the country a better path forward. And what we should be sanguine about and or encouraged by is that our candidates this year, we've been overperforming in every special and local election in the whole country. We've won a whole bunch of races that people didn't think we were going to win. So live fire tests of Democrats versus Republicans on the ground in races of all kinds all across the country, we've continued to overperform 2024. Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger have sturdy and comfortable leads in their states and have much more money than their opponents and will be able to close strong because of the money that we and others have helped them raise. They also both have unprecedented field and volunteer operations. I was at a DNC meeting that I'll talk about in the next few days, over the last couple of days, and we got briefings on the field operations, the ground game in both Virginia and New Jersey. And there's an unprecedented number of volunteers working in both states right now. They have the most aggressive field operations that either state has ever fielded. And because of this intensity that exists right now to sort of fight them. We know that in California this week, we've been ahead in the polls there by huge margins. And in the last few days, the two campaigns running ads for the Republicans both took their ads off the air. And it's not clear that they're going to contest the California redistricting, right? This also now looking like they're going to lose there too. In Pennsylvania, I don't know. Haven't seen reliable poll data on what's happening in Pennsylvania. I will work to get that in the next few days. I feel like this is a race that hasn't been our focus. We've had other things that we've done that I'm really proud of. But I will put some attention on that. Many of you asked me to do that. And then, what I'm really proud of is that we launched our audacious expansion fund. We've taken in $50,000 so far just in a few weeks for these 5 state parties, Alaska, Iowa, Maine, Florida, and Texas. And we just have gotten now commitments from two generous Hopium donors to do $100,000 together, the two donors, to add to that 50. So we're going to be at $150,000 raised, $30,000 for each of those state parties in just a few weeks. I'm really so proud of all of you for doing this. And look what happened. One of these state parties that we funded, whose annual budget is $400,000, the Alaska Democratic Party, right? We've got them 10,000 bucks in a few weeks. It's not a ton of money, but they just had a big win this week. We flipped the second largest city in Alaska from a right-wing Republican now to a Democrat. So I think we should be very encouraged at the political trajectory of where things are. And I've often said that the degradation of Trump and his distance from the public was a necessary but insufficient step to get us to the other side. But part of what I think we need to do now, and my advice to all of you, is that we need to be pushing our 4-part agenda on our electeds and also pushing the resolutions of condemnation. We had another one pass in Stowe, Massachusetts. Congratulations, everybody who worked on that just a couple nights ago, because the resolutions of condemnation are a formal response to this escalating authoritarianism. And I hope that I want to encourage all of you to study what we've done. This is very innovative stuff. Deborah Potter, Rachel Polliner, and the others who've been involved in this have done an incredible job because this should be these kinds of debates about their abandonment of the constitutional order, the return of Mad King George, the escalating authoritarianism. These debates should be raging in every community in the country. And we have a vehicle for you to do that in your own communities, the resolutions of condemnation. But finally, I think the key here is that we just have to keep our head down. So the last two things, call your electeds and push the four-part agenda. We got to roll back the tariffs. We've got to fight this rising authoritarianism. We need to stand up for healthcare in all the ways that we do for healthcare for America and our public health. And we need to stand with our allies in Europe and not with Putin. We need to stand with Zelensky and our allies in Europe and not with Putin. These are the four things that I think we need to be fighting for right now. And what I hope is that we can convince um, Leader Schumer, Leader Jeffries to sort of expand the narrative. I think what may have happened over the last few days with Letitia James, James Comey, now, multiple states now in Illinois, the kind of outrageous behavior we're seeing. I think this kind of message discipline of staying focused on healthcare, I just don't think it's practical anymore. I think the national party needs to be speaking with one voice. And the issue that is moving voters the most, I talked to the people running the races in Virginia and in New Jersey, in the last few days. It's rising prices and affordability. And so we can do more than one thing at a time. We can be talking about rising prices, tariffs, affordability. We can be talking about the threat to healthcare. We can be talking about, the assault on the constitutional order and escalating authoritarianism. We can talk about standing with our allies and democracies all around the world and not with the autocrats. We can do all of this because these are the things that need to be done. And we need to help continue to do what we do here, which is we have to help our elected officials, our leaders, understand what's required of them now. And then finally, we have to stay very focused on winning these fall elections. It's just critical. Many of you are busting your ass, so grateful for that. If you live in a place that has an election, even a local election, vote as early as you possibly can. When you vote early, your name comes off the GOTV rolls. It allows the campaigns to move to lower propensity voters earlier. When we touch lower propensity voters earlier, we actually create more Democratic votes. It makes it more likely our candidates win. So voting early is actually one of the most important things that you can do wherever you are and help your friends and family understand the importance of voting early. We now should be thinking about all of our elections, about winning them in the early vote and not on election day. And it doesn't matter if you vote by mail or you vote in person, it's just vote as early as you can because it creates bigger turnout and it helps us win. So yes, people who voted, thank you, thank you, thank you, right? But now you should be telling your friends and your networks and your communities that I voted. My husband and I voted, we voted, my kids voted. All of you need to vote too. Use your socials, use the way that you communicate, your book clubs, whatever it is, right? Push people to go vote. It's critical now. Indivisible chapters. And then finally, good luck to everybody who's going to be involved in the No Kings rallies on the 18th. I need to focus on those a little bit more. I've been a little busy, but I appreciate many of you are working on those, and those are going to be timely and important because my guess is the government is still shut down. We're still in this fight. But the point I want to make about the government shutdown is that we're in this fight for the next 13 months. We're in this stage of the fight, but there are going to be many more stages. And we just have to win it. We have to win the fall. We have to win the big arguments, which we are. We have to win these elections, which we are on track to do if we keep doing work. And yeah, it can be scary and overwhelming. His badness, his authoritarianism, his illiberalism, Chuck Schumer described him, said tonight something that I didn't think Chuck Schumer would ever say. He said, "This is tyranny," right? I think our electeds may have been slow out of the box, but they're raising their game in a time when we need it to happen, and we just have to keep pushing them to stay in the game and keep fighting. Thanks everybody so much. I'm so grateful for all of you being here tonight and for being part of this amazing community of proud, plucky patriots that we are. And one of my favorite moments this year is when I interviewed Mikey Sherrill the first time, I said, we consider ourselves to be proud, plucky patriots here at Hopium. And she said, I'm a proud, plucky patriot. It was one of my favorite moments this year. In addition to my recent interviews with Gavin Newsom and Cory Booker and Randy Weingarten and all the amazing people, James Tallarico. I mean, everyone who's been here. It's been wonderful, and I hope to be able to continue that momentum with our public events in the coming months because it's what is required. So let me get to questions.